Perspective, presented by the New Orleans Secularist Association, following a few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge. We're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello again, folks. I'm Harry Greenberger, host for the show. We appreciate your being here with us because we try to give you interesting things to observe and think about and maybe become part of your lives. Well, my guest today is Jeanne Nathan.
Hi,
and we have known each other on and off through decades, if I can say.
About 4 decades.
If I might say that. But let me just say this, it's not a requirement to be on my show that anyone agree with me and my organization, but just to explain who we secular humanists are. There are the basic questions that we all ask as we begin to mature is, who are we? Where did I come from? What am I doing here? Where am I going to go? Now, we can answer some of those questions. We know how we got here. There's evolution, explains how you and I are sitting here. What are we? Well, we know we're part of the animal kingdom, we're aware of that. We know where we are in the universes. We know where our little Earth exists, so we know that. But the question cannot answer is, why are we here? And there are people who give answers, and then all of the religions can give you an answer. But from our point of view, that's an unanswerable question. We just are here, and let's make the most of it, okay? Now, I think Jeanne is someone who is making the most of her life here because she is the executive director of the Creative Alliance of New Orleans. Tell us what that is.
Well, we are a group of people who are either artists or who are involved in something called the creative industries, which is a very broad term because it involves performing, visual, media, design, culinary, literary arts. It's very broad, building arts. We have so many craftsmen in the city who have built the beautiful architecture that we all love and want to live amongst. They're artists and people who are technical people who produce things for the internet are artists, filmmakers, video artists, landscape architects, interior designers. These are all creative people, and this is a industry sector that is growing by leaps and bounds around the globe because this is really the beginning of another revolution. We've been through the Industrial Revolution. We once went through the Agrarian Revolution early in our evolution, right? And we've been through the Technical Revolution now for several decades. But the next revolution has begun, and it's the Creative Revolution, because so much of manufacturing can be done now really by machine. And so that's put a lot of us out of work who worked in that industry, which, going back to what we were talking about off the air before, is one of the sources of the anger in our country, is that so many jobs have been taken away from us. But the new jobs are creative jobs. There's an issue with making sure that people who are more traditional business and economic development and public sector thinkers understand how important this is for our future. And so our organization is really in the business of trying to help folks understand and appreciate the broad importance of creativity beyond just the enjoyment of art. We all enjoy it. We all enjoy music. We all enjoy visual arts. We all enjoy our architecture, our gardens, and so forth. But we don't think about the economic impact and value of it, and therefore we're not investing in it enough. So we were talking before the new galleries in town. There are hundreds of them when there were maybe a half a dozen when we first knew each other.
Yes.
But those artists who are making that art are not selling enough. And so we could very well reach a point where a lot of folks who have moved here, and I heard a number yesterday that was astounding from someone who's been doing some research on this, that we've gained 80,000 white people in the city, many of whom came here for the culture and the creativity. But a lot of people also have leaving because they can't support themselves.
Well, we still have a smaller population than we had before Katrina. We have not returned to that same level.
A lot of people have not been able to come back or have chosen not to, and we don't really know enough about them. We don't know why they haven't come back. We know some don't have jobs. We know some can't afford to rebuild. We know some are happy where they are. So that's a big question. How do we get our people back? And I love that we have new people coming in, but I'm uncomfortable with people not being able to come back who had to leave in a moment's notice after the storm.
But back to what you said earlier, are you saying that technology cannot replace living art people?
You know, technology is used by art people. More and more art is being made through electronic technology. Technology are tools. They're just tools.
Are you
Different
saying
kinds
that
of tools.
a computer cannot compose a symphony?
Computers can do a lot. Somewhere behind on the keyboard is a human.
All right.
So ultimately, no matter what a computer can do for you, there's still a creator behind it. So I had somebody recently who runs a technology company, not so recent, but a couple years ago, say to me, technology is technology. It's not linked to creativity. And I said, how can you say that? Technology and the impact that it has on the internet is all about content. And it's just a means to get that content into the internet. Technology is just how you move stuff.
Yes.
But the creative content is what we are viewing and wanting to enjoy and learn from on the internet. Technology just gets it there.
All right. Now, what are you saying in your creative alliance that these artistically inclined or involved people need some kind of assistance? Why is that? Let's take the example of White Linen Night and some of the other events that occur, the monthly open houses on Julia Street and on St. Claude. Big crowds of folks come out because it's the fun thing to do. It's a party. Event, yes.
And we can always make a party out of anything in New Orleans and Louisiana,
yes.
right? How many of those people are actually buying art? Not enough.
Very few, I would agree.
So ultimately, art becomes a kind of a party favor if people don't buy it. So getting folks to understand they can actually afford to buy work, because we do something called Art Home Tours, New Orleans. Art Home New Orleans tours.
Okay.
And what we do is bring people into the studios of artists and into the homes of private art collectors who are not hedge fund managers in New York who can go to Sotheby's auction house and spend $10 million on a masterwork from the last century. Rather, have work by young living artists whose work can cost maybe a few $100s. That's not cheap, but you spend a few $100s on a suit. You spend maybe $100 on a pair of shoes. If you can do that, you can spend a few $100s on a work of art, original art, by a living artist in this community. So we try to expose people to collections of work that is not the 8-figure works,
All right.
but rather the 3-figure works.
But now, how do you get either the locals or the tourists to buy art?
Well, that's what I was just saying. We do these tours. We bring them
All right, you
into
do
the
a tour.
homes of people and into our studios of
Okay.
artists. That's one way. Another way that we do, we have something called creative spaces. And what we do is we borrow space in buildings where there's underutilized space. And we put on shows of work by artists to...
And these are artists who are otherwise not represented in galleries?
It could be either people who are represented in galleries or people who are not. I would say most of what we've shown have been maybe 70% people who are not represented in other galleries.
And you get good attendance to those events?
Yes, we do, but here's the catch. To
Yes.
get people to that space, to get people on that tour, to get people into that gallery, what does it take, Harry? You know, marketing. And you know what they don't have money for, artists and artist organizations and galleries? Marketing.
Oh,
So
yes.
one of the things that I work towards is trying to get funding, both private and public, for the marketing of our creative organizations and businesses and independent producers. And that is a very tough task. But there's a model for it, and a very simple model, and that is the tourism industry.
Okay.
Harry, you remember, as I do, in the 70s, when the tourism office was on Royal Street.
Yes.
And you had two people in that office, Ed McNeil and Beverly Jeanne.
Yes.
That was the tourism industry in New Orleans.
Yes.
And most people in New Orleans at that time said, don't bring those buses into the French Quarter. We don't want those buses. And don't do this. And people were we had a sort of isolationist policy in New Orleans, right? It was like, leave us alone. We like it the way it is. Ed McNeil said, tourism generates economic impact, jobs, and spending. And he went out to prove it, and he did statistical research that showed this is the impact of tourism. Once he had those numbers put together, he went up to the state and said, give us some money back, because we're generating all this income for you. And they got the state to commit dedicated funding for marketing tourism. Look where we are now. It is a huge driver. Millions of people. It is actually our top economic generator in the state. I say, let's do the same for the culture and the creative people and organizations and galleries and theaters in our city, that they all go out in the tourism world and say, this is what New Orleans is all about, but they're not supporting.
Well, at one time, when I was the head of the French Quarter Business Association and a member of the Chamber of Commerce, I requested the opportunity and was allowed to address their board. And I went there to the Chamber of Commerce and I said, the number one or the number two source of revenue in this city is tourism. And this Chamber of Commerce is not doing anything for tourism. I said, you don't even have a chapter for the French Quarter. So they made me chairman of a French Quarter committee. But here,
Be careful what you ask.
but they, I think they agreed. They understood when I said it's a first or second industry, and you are not paying any attention to it. Even though we had a tourist commission, the Chamber of Commerce is supposed to be there to get business for us, for we who are there.
And they didn't embrace it. And you see, we're going through that same struggle, and I would have to call it a struggle. We're going through that same process right now. Now, I just want to say this because for anybody in the tourism business who's watching this, we know that there have been grants made to help various cultural initiatives.
Yes.
So it's not like they don't appreciate what we do. It's just that the scale of their contribution is inadequate by huge measure
Yes.
to what it should be in order for our creative sector to grow the way the tourism industry grew.
Yes.
Now, in a way, I have to say it's not their fault. It's our fault. That's us in the creative field. We need to be more unified and get out of our silos and work together. So one of the things we're doing is forming something called the Breakthrough Coalition. And this Breakthrough Coalition is meant to bring people from different sectors of the economy together to work with people in the creative sector to get that dedicated funding that spawned the tourism industry here. If we can get the kind of funding that that they're using in cities like Denver and Jackson and Cleveland and not just New York, LA, Miami, Chicago, but all these smaller, they're all going after this because this has become recognized.
And they don't have the material to work with.
And they don't have nearly the talent and creativity we have here. We have a program also in the schools called Creative Futures, where we go in and we try to help students understand all of the opportunities in the creative industries. And I get into the classroom on occasion, and I meet with the students that we work with, and I am just totally shocked at the extensive level of the creativity of our youth in this city. And I have to believe, even though the statistics are not available, that it is a much higher percentage of our population than in many other cities. Why? That's a complicated question that goes back to all of our cultural legacy, because these are culture bearers.
Yeah.
Even if they're young kids doing hip-hop music or rap, they're culture bearers because there's been this impact on them from the jazz musicians, from the social aid and pleasure clubs, from the Mardi Gras Indians, from all of our fine arts.
And architecture as well.
And our architects. That has an impact on our youth. So yes, we have a high level of creativity here. We are not channeling it to the benefit of the individuals and our economy in general to the extent that we could. We're viewed internationally as one of the cultural capitals of the globe.
Oh, yes.
We changed global culture. Jazz music, blues changed the entire way culture is expressed worldwide, and yet we still are not supporting it to the extent that we could actually be a cultural center in the economic sense so that people could stay here. Aren't we tired of people having to leave here? This has been going on since before
Yes.
Louis Armstrong,
Oh, yeah.
Buddy
Yeah.
Bolden, Sidney Bechet. Those characters all had to go make their Bessie Smith. They all had to go someplace else to make their living. And to this day, still, you talk to our architects, you talk to the art galleries, and they are having to deal with that national market. And many of them wind up leaving still. Harry and Winton, those folks, we need to keep them here.
Now, I don't want our time to run out without...
If you let me talk, we'll run out of time.
Without mentioning your husband.
Absolutely.
Robert Tannen. And I know that he has been and of course he's a nationally or internationally recognized artist. He also has been involved with the thing called Prospect 1, Prospect 2, Prospect 3. Tell me what that's all about.
I am such a fan of Prospect. Let me do Prospect first, and then I'll do Tannen.
Okay.
I'm such a fan of Prospect because Dan Cameron, who founded it not too long after the Katrina, wanted to, again, to to show the world what was going on here in the arts. Now, his focus was on bringing artists to New Orleans. And that's what a biennial does. It brings artists from all over the world. Some of us in the city were really concerned about making sure that our artists were on show during Prospect. That was actually the founding of the Creative Alliance. We took over an old school that was vacant temporarily after the storm. We filled it with 160 artists and arts organizations to show their work during Prospect when people came in to see the biennial. A biennial is like Basel, it's like the Vienna, Venice Biennale. These are times when a lot of art that's being made around the world all comes together in one place. We have that here now. And Susan Brennan is one of my all-time heroes because at a point when that first effort floundered a little, because first efforts are expensive.
Yes.
I was just reading about how, startups and how they can lose $250,000 a month for years before they start to turn a profit. Startups are difficult. So there was some money lost, and there was an effort to close it down. And she said, no, we're not closing this down. She kept it going. So there you get Prospect 2, 3, and 4 is coming up. It is just an important time to bring people into the city. Now, my husband is very other-oriented as opposed to himself. And so when he was a Prospect artist, he put on a show that was basically, he called it Art by Committee, and he hung tarps on the walls of a shotgun house in the Holy Cross. And he basically said to anybody who walked in the door, here's the paint, here are the brushes, paint on these tarps. Mm-hmm. And it generated 21 murals that were totally undirected by him. So they're just a fabulous collage of the images of people who walked in the door. And that's what he did.
Local artists? Or?
These were anybody who walked in the door. So it could be your grandchild, it could be your mom, it could be full-fledged artists, it could be somebody who lived next door. So a lot of people from Holy Cross came in and painted, and from the Ninth Ward, and people from all over the world painted, and students painted, and artists painted. So it was a beautiful thing.
What became of those canvases?
We're still in the process of distributing them. We gave some to a couple schools. I've been trying to offer it to Nord for 3 years, and I can't get anybody to talk to me about it. So unfortunately, we don't have.
Were these signed by the artists?
Well, that was a funny thing. The artists, the people who made the work, didn't necessarily want to sign it.
Well, that's interesting.
It was very interesting. I think they felt that it was a communal effort, and it was a collaborative thing, and it wasn't just them, and so they didn't feel that they had to claim ownership, so they didn't necessarily sign them. But they're all huge. They're like 9 by, I always get this messed up, but about 9 by 20, 9 feet high, 20 feet wide. And we still have about 21 of them were made, and I've still got more than 15 of them that we'd love to give away. We're still so busy trying to lobby for this support for our community that we haven't moved them as fast as I would like to have, but we will.
I always say, and this may be regrettable, that the price on a piece of art depends upon the signature on it.
Well,
that's
if
it says Picasso and it's in his handwriting, that sets a price. Someone else doing something similar doesn't get the price. Now, that's unfortunate because we have this world of starving artists who are very good artists, but they just haven't. Many of them can't get gallery representation. When I was in the gallery business, we would have good artists come looking for a gallery to display in, and there just were not enough galleries for all of the capable artists. Now, in recent years, a lot of new galleries have opened, but there are still leading galleries that good artists would like to be represented in. And they can't take any more artists. So what's the solution?
So let me say this. I believe that the gallery system of showing art is totally anachronistic. It would be as if, Harry, the only way we could buy clothes would be from couturier boutiques. and that we couldn't go to a Target, or we couldn't go to a flea market, or we couldn't go to a department store, or new little shops that have opened up all over, up and down Magazine Street. It's a chokehold on the potential market of art, and I do believe that other ways of selling art are tremendously important, and that's why some of the things that are being done now that we do in our creative spaces. There's a gallery on St. Claude Avenue now where John Marshall just curated a show of 100 women artists. It's just about to close, and by the time this show airs, it'll probably be closed. But showing art in bigger spaces that are not necessarily either museums or galleries is critical to allowing more art to be sold. And when we do our tours, these Art Home New Orleans tours, we sell art. We don't sell art, but the artists whose homes we go to and whose studios we go to, they get an opportunity to sell art.
I'm looking at your material, and it refers to the Crevasse 22 Sculpture Garden and River House Art Center in Poydras.
Don't you love that there is contemporary art by living artists on view all the way downriver in St. Bernard Parish? And by the way, it only takes about 25 minutes to get to Poydras from the French Quarter. And Sidney Torres and his partner Roberta Burns have been so generous in allowing their property to be the home base for a sculpture garden and a museum. And in both of those facilities, we're showing work of contemporary artists from around the region, from St. Bernard, from Orleans, from everywhere.
And you're getting visitors.
And we're getting visitors, but you know why? Because we market. And in our case, we've been doing it on a shoestring. We do it through social media. Thank goodness for social media now, right? But again, we'd get many, many more visitors if we had some marketing dollars. Right now, what we do is we put on brunches and we do events in order to bring people in, and that's very costly in human labor to organize those events, as I'm sure you know. So again, to grow that, we are hoping that we will find a way to do what the tourism industry did, generate the data, get a commitment from both the public and the private sector to pour a little bit more money, mainly into the marketing of what's already going on.
Are you getting encouragement and support in what you just said we need to do?
I will have to say that I've been a little bit disappointed in my own ability to generate that support. I thought I would be further along right now than I am. So it has been a struggle. I have been turned down recently by some of the foundations in New Orleans. We get good support from a lot of people. We get the NEA has been supportive. The State Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism has been supportive. We've gotten some support from the city and from the New Orleans Tourism Marketing Corporation, but not as much as I had hoped for, and so yes, it's been a struggle.
Well, I'm hoping things turn around more in our favor, and I do want to thank you folks for watching our show. I'm sure that you found it interesting and enlightening, and be with us more often.